Hi, everyone. I want to welcome you to our first in a series of thought leadership conversations that NovusNorth will be hosting. My name is Mona Champaneri, and I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at NovusNorth. NovusNorth is an expert-led provider of product design, development, and delivery services for the fintech and financial services industry. At NovusNorth, we believe that great digital experiences drive great outcomes. Today, we'll be speaking with a leader in the fintech industry, Nasir Barday. Nasir has delivered some phenomenal designs for companies like Goldman, Fidelity, Wells Fargo, and Citadel, just to name a few. Today, I'm lucky enough to get a chance to sit one-on-one with Nasir and discuss some trends and opportunities in the FinTech UX space and how product owners can leverage user experience. Hi, Nasir.
Hi, Mona. It's good to talk to you again.
Yeah, you too. Do you want to take a minute and introduce yourself?
Sure. So you kind of touched on it, but a lot of my financial experience, the arc that it travels is going from the retail space into the institutional and back into the retail side. So I touched pretty much all the parts of the financial system. Active trading tool for E-Trade, a market making system for an alternative trading system. It was pretty much called an alternative stock exchange called Luminex. Back into where it ends up on companies' balance sheets, so portfolio management systems for a few of the brands that you mentioned, Citadel for JP Morgan, to name a few. Then once that goes into, then when we start talking about the investment portfolio of banks and these assets are on their balance sheets, managing those portfolios, and then lending those back out. So Goldman Sachs Marcus is a personal lending platform that achieved that objective for that bank.
That's a really impressive background. Oh, go
Thanks. And so just to put a cap on all of that, I'm also pursuing the CFA charter, a CFA level 3 candidate, just to have a much deeper dive into finance, the nerdy details like valuing a bond or getting into the details of private wealth management.
That's very impressive, Nasir. I'm so happy to spend this time talking to you. Let's get our conversation started with some trends that you're seeing in the FinTech UX space and what product owners really need to look out for as we embark 2022.
Sure thing. So some trends in the FinTech UX space, specifically when it comes to UX and creating products. An ongoing trend that we've seen is that companies band together to kind of leverage their shared resources. So anything from a KYC system that we worked on a while ago, to market making systems, to even just research marketplaces, as well as even chat tools like Symphony. People in the industry are getting together and working together and breaking the barriers that you traditionally saw where institutions didn't trust each other. So now they're starting to band together and leverage each other's efforts. Something else, specifically when it comes to UX, is before we used to talk about how there was this big differentiation between the UX skill set and the visual design skill set. When it comes to delivering digital products, we'll talk about this later, but a big part of this is now UX designers are being tasked with getting high visual fidelity in their deliverables so that those become development ready. So you no longer see dedicated visual designer roles. You're starting to see all of that packaged, at least when it comes to product, seeing all of that packaged into one role. And usually that's enabled by a pretty well-stocked design system.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, the trends that we're seeing here at NovusNorth is that everything's really geared towards streamlining work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Whether it's within roles, how do you take on more within the same role? Even on the product management, product ownership side, they're taking on more roles as well. But really focusing in on pulling that brain power together to get the best results.
And a lot of that is, we're also noticing that a lot of that is coming from outside the industry too. So I'm a big proponent of specializing, and we'll talk about that in a second. But you're also seeing a lot of these roles getting staffed, especially when you talk about more consumer-facing interfaces and products. You don't necessarily have to be a financial industry veteran to get the opportunity to work on some of these things. So client-facing self-service portals. Actually, no one's using the word portal anymore, but dashboards or things that you log into to check your accounts, apps on the phone. You're seeing people getting hired from Facebook, Instagram, elsewhere in big tech. So it's not necessarily just a finance professionals game.
Yeah.
And actually, that reminds me, a big part of this, it kind of just speaks to the fact that the really successful companies in this space, especially when it comes to consumer-oriented finance, but even institutional finance, they're using experience as a differentiator. So a good experience becomes the basis of a metric to measure whether a product is successful or not.
Yeah, that's right. So can you tell us a little bit more about some of these opportunities that you are seeing in that FinTech digital product space?
Yeah, sure thing. There's actually a lot of change that's already set into the industry, and even more that we're going to continue to see as crypto and those sorts of things start changing the landscape. I would say at a tactical level, anytime that I start an engagement, the first thing that people ask for is the download to Excel button. And almost right after that, people are asking for really customizable interfaces. And what I've been doing with clients is just saying, let's take a step back on that, because what you end up seeing users doing or business partners doing when they look to validate whether an interface is successful or not, if something's missing, they immediately say, you know what, I would say something here, but you got a download to Excel button. And I can use that to sort and filter, slice and dice, come up with the detailed query that I want to get this in the way that I want it. But I would say that the game is over once they want to download it to Excel, because now what is the point of even having investing all of this time and money into a platform if people are just going to take it out and manipulate it somewhere else? It's one thing if it just needs to get woven into a model, which is completely valid. But if they're just downloading it to Excel so they can customize the data set a little bit more, those things can easily be folded back into the platform. And in the same way, when we talk about customizability, that's another crutch. So if you're just trying to get something to look a way that fits your workflow better, let's get within 2 standard deviations of those kinds of customizations you want to do, so that by the time it hits your desktop, you don't feel like you need to manipulate the thing just to get it working. It actually matches how you wanted to look at it in the first place. On the topic of Excel, this is a little bit further out, but as data science and quant skills become a little bit more common in the industry and among the workforce, we're going to start seeing Excel get supplanted by, maybe not entirely right now, but eventually Jupyter notebooks are going to start taking over. So your competition is no longer just the second best tool for everything Excel, but also that whole notion of a download to Excel button becomes connected to an API and be able to create customizable queries through an API. So the next tool that sits alongside the platforms that we're building are going to be Jupyter notebooks and using Python to grab data sets in a more democratized way. And to that end, as you have more data science skill set and more of a quantitative skill set on the front lines, the kinds of data that we need to visualize aren't just going to be scalar numbers. They're going to be ranges of numbers. They're going to be probability distributions. So the challenge is going to be, how do I actually show you that the system thinks that this value is here with this level of confidence? We have some standard visualizations like box and whisker plots, violin plots, other ways to show those distributions, but I think there's a lot of opportunity to think beyond those. Further, when we're looking at single numbers right now, they happen to just be simple averages. What is the average across this large set of numbers? Data scientists are more and more telling us that that medians are the best way to show that. Medians actually account for outliers. So if you see that your mean and median are way off, that tells you that an outlier is shifting the mean a certain way disproportionately. And the reason I bring that up is we want to make it clear. Do we have to just say that this thing's a median versus a mean? Or can we be a little bit more clear that there are some outliers that are shifting this one way or another? And so there's a few other things here too. So, all of this is kind of summed up by talking about managing complexity. So when someone talks about how a certain finance problem or something that you're trying to solve is complicated, all they're really saying is that the complexity is poorly managed. So when it comes to managing complexity, there's a standard UX principles here, right? What do people need to know at the moment that they need it? And how do you provide those details on demand, bring those up to their fingertips so that the complexity is managed? So now you end up with a deceptively simple interface that shows you the basic numbers, but it's not too watered down because now it becomes something that can expand out to other values that you can dig into. Right. Well, there's more, I guess. There's, another thing is around making financial experiences safer. So when we talk about logging in, just simple things like authentication, as crypto assets start becoming more common, and they are becoming more common, they will become more common. They're going to be a design problem to figure out. The biggest one are these things called YubiKeys. I've got a couple here. In fact, the best practice is to have two. One is your primary and one is your backup. These are going to start replacing your two-factor authentication, or become your two-factor authentication device. So we're going to move away from SMS, text messages as the thing that comes in after you enter your password, to using a hardware device like this to either plug in or to tap to your device to be that thing that you have part of security. Well, as we're making people more safe with crypto assets, you actually need to become your own custodian in some ways. There are crypto wallets and those sorts of things, but there are passphrases and things that you need to keep secure, and data that you need to keep secure locally on your system. We need to be more resilient to SIM swaps and those sorts of things. So YubiKeys are an important part of that. They can also become something that we embrace and weave into the experience. So if we want to make people safer as they're transacting out on the internet and Web3 as that develops, we need to account for these other types of hardware devices and even just other authentication apps like Authy and Google Authenticator to become part of our experiences. So it's a lot of change. There's a lot of stuff that's happening in the industry. And something that a lot of people don't know is that when we process change, the reason it's so painful is because it's actually change is processed in the same part of your brain that pain is processed. So it's no surprise that it's hard to get people to change their behavior, to embrace shifting trends and that sort of thing. So, while all of this stuff is happening and I'm talking about these being opportunities, I don't want to make light of the fact that these are, hairy problems that we need to put attention to.
Nasir, what's your take on adding hardware to be more secure? That instead of just carrying your phone, you're also carrying around those YubiKeys. What's your take on that? Like having additional things rather than encapsulating it all within one device?
It's a whole other way to think about logging in, right? So, now from having the convenience of a phone in my pocket, now I have to pull out my keychain. And not only that, the problem with having an SMS-based two-factor authentication is that phone itself can be compromised. The authenticator itself could eventually get compromised. It is a behavior change though. So now when I'm talking about logging into my bank accounts or making a trade online, I have to reach into my pocket or go find my keys now to put this thing up. And then it also means though that I can have a second one of these things somewhere else in a safe location. So in case this thing breaks down, instead of a phone getting compromised, or let's say that it gets lost, you at least have a backup copy somewhere else. But it's definitely not, I will say that it's not going to be something that happens overnight, but in the crypto community, these types of ways to stay secure are becoming more common.
Yeah. So we've been in the space for almost 2 decades now, and the bar keeps rising. And, I've always said, if you're staying still, you're already behind. So it's just part of the change, the pain point in your brain that you do have to get comfortable with and make that part of your day-to-day. But if you don't mind, let's shift gears a bit, Nasir, and talk about designing with a product versus a production mindset. What does that mean for you? What direction should teams be moving in? And how do you translate that?
Sure thing. So there are a lot of teams out there, and maybe you're part of one right now, where the activities that you're doing are pretty much, for lack of a better term, keeping the lights on, right? Very transactional, super tactical. So how do we get to a place where you're a tactical based UX team to actually affecting real strategic change? That's the dream, right? We can set up teams so that they actually not only are resilient to change, but they're actually energized by change and actually feed off of change happening in the industry, rather than just trying to make some interventions that ease a transition. So what I mean by that is, as UX people, and I'll actually stop using the term UX and I'll start talking about us as designers, right? So as part of the design team, when we do our research, we become part of the front lines of understanding what are those shifting trends, what are the changes in behavior, how are the needs of users changing, something as simple as what are the types of screens people are using on their desktops, what are they leveraging, how does the mobile constellation work with that, all the way through to how is the actual nature of the work changing, what does it mean for a certain asset class. What are the workflows that happen back and forth for the work as it shifts? So, the design team is really well placed to enable users and to make the case strategically for what the payoffs can be for embarking on these new projects to address these changes that are happening. So, I mentioned earlier what some of the other changes are that are happening, but other things, when we talk about crypto, we're talking about decentralized finance, we're talking about eventually the settlement periods going from 2 days to 1 day to eventually 0 days. NFTs are just they're kind of a fad right now, but I would say they're scratching the tip of the iceberg. We still haven't talked yet about monetizing cash flows. So if someone can sell a piece of digital art right now, but it can have cash flows associated with it. They're already talking about how the original person who minted an NFT gets 10% as part of the baked-in nature of an NFT. They get 10% off of those secondary sales as someone sells it on to other people. There's a lot of disintermediation happening in the industry. So all of these are things that we can be out there sensing now, having a kind of a telescope onto the horizon and taking that back to our teams and saying, hey, these are some trends that we're noticing. Here's some cool things that we could do. But again, it's not easy because, you definitely want to be, you want to have executive sponsorship. There's just no way around having someone in the company that's actually being your champion for the team. You can do this at some low level and kind of experiment around, have a lab or something, but it is really important to have somebody in leadership that's being a champion for design and making the company itself more product led. Along those lines, design is no longer a nice to have. I mentioned earlier about design being a differentiator. That is the key part now of any product, and that defines whether it's successful or not. Is does the product actually have empathy for its users? Does the service have empathy for its users? Is it really matching how people are working?
Yeah. And I love that, thinking about a product and design within a product as the end game. What is the end game? Not just how are we going to do the work? Let's set the stage, let's set our path, and then the work we'll figure it out as we go. Everything is doable at this stage in technology, right? We just need to know what we want to do. So I agree with you completely. And seeing UX or design as a cost center or as a means to the end is not the right way to look at design, right? It's seeing as how can it be an integral part in that final result, in that final product, because design is your differentiator, right?
Mhm.
How many times have you used a product and the design's completely terrible and you move on to the next competitor product within
Mhm.
like a few minutes, even less,
Mhm.
right? So that we've got such a little time period to make that difference. And a lot of people, if you're considering UX as a cost center, design as a cost center, then you've already lost that client, that customer.
That makes me remember something that, there's this constant use of the word innovation. It's almost become a currency in the industry. And innovation is it's such a lofty term, but you really can make innovative ideas come out less of an accident. You can make innovation less of an accident and more like breathing, like a routine thing that happens just by having this shared empathy across the team. So design is also really well placed to make sure that the rest of the team knows what's happening with the user journey. And you know what? The ideas don't just have to come from the design team. They can and should be collaboratively arrived at with the rest of the team. But I think design plays a very big leadership role in surfacing those opportunities and figuring out how to address them with innovative solutions.
Yeah. Yeah. I've seen developers be super creative in solving problems as well. And designers, giving them kudos like, thank you for pointing that out. I would have not seen it. So creativity can come from every element of the team, every organization within the product. Speaking of organization, what does that mean for a UX team? How can you organize in the UX team to make the most of it?
Yeah, actually, that is a really good segue. I would say the operative word here is partnership. So, you have three legs of a stool. You have your business or product, you have engineering, good technology, and you have design. Those are kind of your three table stakes element of what makes a successful product, a successful service even. And so how do you get there, right? So I mentioned earlier the keep the lights on type of team. The shape of a UX team can vary greatly, and it just depends on where you guys are on that curve or where a team is on that curve. So you can have anything from a team of one, kind of a lone ranger. I've definitely been in that role a couple of times, all the way up to a fully functioning team that's kind of a service organization that's kind of lending out its talent on a consulting basis. And then there's other models too, where you can actually matrix those designers into the organization. So you have kind of a center of practice, center of excellence, community of practice rather, and those people are kind of deeply embedded in the various verticals, and then they kind of meet on a regular basis to keep their blades sharp from a craft perspective. But there's definitely a couple of ways to organize the team to be successful.
Yeah. I've heard you talk about maturity models before. Can you dive into that a little bit?
Sure thing. So, I think a big part of it also comes down to sponsorship and how much backup you have from the rest of the organization and how much investment they're going to have. So I mentioned those different ways to organize a team. So when there's a smaller investment, it is kind of a scrappy, smaller executing team that has kind of limited in the scope of projects it can take on. Sometimes it's just an experiment. I would say that's the beginning elements where UX is kind of seen more as a tactical, sometimes an after the fact type of thing. When you're that small and, usually when it's that small, you're usually kind of a team that's trying to win that sponsorship from the larger organization. You become a little bit more tactical, which is fine. You're kind of doing the window dressing and trying to establish credibility for design within the org. As it kind of gains a little bit more traction, you end up with somebody in leadership or somebody within that smaller scrappy team gets promoted up, either in the business organization, the product organization, and starts becoming a champion and starts building out that team and creating a parallel structure with engineering. So you have designers paired with product, paired with engineering, and then eventually growing that team out to a larger community of practice. So then, if it's firing on all cylinders, you have a reporting structure that goes all the way to the CEO with very few steps. There's a lot of visibility. People all the way up to the CEO, no joke, in a very design mature organization, a design led organization, the CEO themselves will be reviewing what's going out and affecting the experience of their customers, of their users. So, there's a big evolution from what we used to think of as a UX practice, where it was kind of this walled garden of, we're going to focus on interaction design and behavior and visual design and these other elements that support the practice are separate roles, and that person is a unicorn. Now we're starting to see that with the support of a design system, the people on a UX team are being pressed into service as the people who are also providing production ready wireframes. For better or for worse, that's kind of where we are right now, is that as product designers, now service designers might be a whole other conversation, but when we talk about designing products, especially when talking about designing them in FinTech, people are being tasked with not only coming up with what those behaviors are, but also getting those things polished up and ready for development to build, and partnering with development to actually execute on the details.
Yeah, I've had a lot of product owners ask me how they can pitch design teams to their leadership, their executive leadership, because they feel that it is a very important integral part of their product, but they need that stakeholder buy-in. And that maturity model is key. If you're not mature enough to get that buy-in, you need to get that product to that level in order to have that the full stakeholder adoption. So maybe we talk a little bit about how do product owners shift that maturity model in the right direction, and what are those building blocks that they need for a product design team to be created. What would you say are the building blocks that you look for when you're setting up UX teams and design teams?
Yeah, I would say it's really important as you're building a product design team. When we talk about building any team, it starts with the talent. We always say that when we're building teams, and it's especially important here, especially as you're building credibility for design. If you're trying to make the case for actually making a larger investment there, you have to start with talent that's really good at executing. And so the common adage we use in the design world is the T-shaped skill set. So what we mean by that is people who can practice across the different specialties that we have, everything from actual UX research, usability testing and validation, the interaction design, the visual design, motion design, all of those elements. People should be able to do every element of that. And that doesn't mean that you have to be expert at everything, but you should be able to actually do it, so that when you're executing as a smaller team, all of that can get done at some level. And then what you start having is, within these teams, they start specializing in certain skill sets. So you'll have a T-shaped designer who happens to be more focused on behavior and interaction design. That's their happy place. Great. Put that person over here, partner them with someone who's a little bit more visually focused. But the key ingredients are having the people that can actually execute on this. We can talk till we're blue in the face about processes, but if you don't have people who are actually moving the ball forward at a fast pace and getting the results that you need to make the case, it'll fall flat.
Yeah. And sometimes you need help setting that team up, right? So NovusNorth actually has done this quite a bit. The team here has kickstarted a lot of design teams based on project work we've done. We've come in, set up the first V1 product launch, and then we've helped companies develop that UX practice, help them hire and build those teams, and those development standards, design standards, put all of that together. So knowing the NovusNorth team and the organization well, why do you feel that this is the team to look out for?
Well, I've worked with a lot of you guys, actually all of you guys in the past, and so I know how this team operates. And so, if we were to veer into sales pitch territory for a second. The thing that you get with NovusNorth is a super fast executing team. So I mentioned earlier that the key ingredient of a successful design team is the talent. Well, you're going to get really top talent with these guys. But what's also really interesting about what NovusNorth brings to the table is they're not interested in these in building dependency on them. In fact, when we're talking about what NovusNorth offers, it's not just we're going to have people here and we're going to continue to work on these projects and make you feel like you need them to continue to execute on the product. What the team can do is actually help you get to really fast results really quickly. At the same time, help you build up a team to actually work on that problem over there, so that you can continue to build that talent internally, and then start shifting focus. So, we're talking about partnership in the true sense of the word, and that, again, we're not interested, or NovusNorth is not interested in being people who build a dependency, but what they want is to be a longer term partner. So let's have you be reactive and proactive about solving these problems that you've started discovering, get fast executing, build a team, get that going internally, and then free you up to start thinking about the next problem. And so what I know about you guys is that you're not interested necessarily in continuing to work on the same thing over and over again. You guys are really interested in getting those problems solved in a quick way, getting your clients up to speed so they can start solving those themselves, and then helping the people that you work with figure out what's next.
Yeah, I think you stole the words right out of my mouth. Is what's next. We believe results drive outcomes, not just getting the work done. Let's show us results. One thing, if I could put it out there, that chief product officers should look for in their design partner, and this is what NovusNorth marches to the order of, is we know that quality results come from being transparent and collaborative with our clients. And we put being a trusted partner in the forefront of everything we do. Transparency is the means to becoming a trusted partner. But we want to guide our clients through change. Like you said, change is processed in the same part of your brain as pain. And change can be hard, especially if you're a large organization. So to have a Sherpa that has been there, that's gone through changes with large organizations, it's almost like hold our hand, we'll get you through it. We know the route. So that's the way we take on projects at NovusNorth. We are that partner in the capital sense, partner with the capital P, that's what I mean. And so we make sure that we get you through to the end. And then we make sure that you can survive once you've gotten there with that team.
I totally agree with that. Yeah, I mean, if you're somebody who is in leadership, who's trying to bolt on a UX team or trying to start one up, if you're a chief product officer, a head of product, elsewhere in the business leadership, the thing that you get with this team is fast results, but also a team that wants to help you and work with you as a truly a trusted partner to work on what's next once you've identified those projects you want to work on.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nasir. You're the first thought leader in this series of expert series that NovusNorth is putting on. So we really appreciate you being part of this. And best of luck in what you do next. And we're excited to see how you innovate and perform going forward. So we'll keep an eye out for you.
Sure thing. Good talking with you again.
Yeah, take care.
Cheers.